Hi, this is Jennifer Bastian with my third presentation for Communications 2110. And what I chose to talk on was defensiveness. And the reason why I chose defensiveness was because I just learned so much in this chapter. More than I've learned anything else throughout the whole semester. I'm just amazed at how many people in my work, in my church, at my own house, how many people are so quick to jump to being defensive. It's absolutely amazing if you just sit back and watch, and that's what I've been doing since the chapter, and I have found so many ways that I can change how I talk to somebody or how I approach them, and it completely changes the way that the whole conversation, the whole communication goes, and I've just found that it's just so important, and so that's what I chose. The text says defensiveness suggests guarding oneself from attack, but what kind of attack? On leadershipandtraining.com, I found that people feel unsafe whenever they fear, and that just makes sense. Whether it is physical or if it's emotional state, we fear, we get scared, and then when we get scared, we jump to the defense. It says being found to be less than what we want others, being found to be less what they want others to perceive them as, or a loss of status. How many times have we fallen short? And when we fall short, we want to blame somebody else. We want it to be somebody else's fault. It's not our fault, so we jump to the defense. Or our self-image is under challenge, or our self-esteem is threatened. The biggest one I thought in here was rejection. I think sometimes we're so busy trying to fit in, be perfect everywhere, that, you know, sometimes we have to make ourselves bigger than we're supposed to be, and we have to explain all of our faults, which we all have, and I think that's a character defect in a lot of people, me as well. Dr. Will Schultz is the creator of one of the most effective interpersonal programs to alleviate failed verbal exchanges, the Fundamental Interpersonal Relations Orientation. It's called FIRO. They first used it to help U.S. Navy improve relationships among battleship command teams, and later revised it for individuals. And it was built on the theory that increased self-awareness reduces defensiveness in conflicted situations. The thing is we have to know ourselves. We have to know what scares us. We have to know what drives us, what really is going to kind of get our goat, I guess is what I want to say. We have to know what those are, so that when it's threatened or when somebody says something, we know why we're going to react the way we're going to react. We have to be able to think it through, but you have to be able to think it through beforehand. It can't be just right then. Judge Jim Tam said, in the 25 years as a judge dealing with relationship issues, he almost never had to resolve legal disputes. And this is a judge. People were almost always before me because someone got defensive and became a bad problem solver. Here's the best part. Defensiveness is a poison pill to good relationships. In conflict, defensiveness is like blood in the water to a shark. A little here, a little there, and in no time, the situation has degenerated into a feeding frenzy. I love this. It says, remaining non-defensive is the single most important thing you can do to increase your effectiveness when working to turn conflict into collaboration. So many times we completely ruin all channels of communication because we jump to the defense. We're done listening, we're done hearing, we're done talking. It's just amazing. You can even do it without even saying a word. You know, you can do it by your body language. Defensiveness ultimately is about not protecting ourselves from other people. People get defensive because they don't want to experience uncomfortable feelings within themselves. And that's what we talked about, having to know ourselves, having our own self-awareness. Getting defensive will temporarily block the feelings that they don't want to experience. The prescription for dealing with your own defensiveness is to let yourself experience those feelings, as uncomfortable as they may be. And that's why we have to be self-aware. That's why we have to know ourselves. We have to know where we come from, the reasons why we think the things that we do, and that helps us to better deal with everyday situations. Now, in the book, it talked a lot about the Gibb theory. So the Gibb categories is what I want to talk about. And what I found fascinating was Gibb himself. His name was Jack R. Gibb, and I tried really hard to find some information about him, and I even looked at all of the books that he'd written, and there just wasn't much about the author himself. But the text said that he had spent several years observing groups. In one of the book, you know, the front of his books, because he's written many books and journals and had a lot of things published, it said that he actually spent 9 years observing these groups, and he was able to isolate the defense arousing communication. He was able to identify them and put them into 6 categories, and then he turned around and he took 6 categories that would help each of these things. And I found that most of them were very informational to me. Some of them, I guess, you kind of knew, but evaluation and description, I think we had already talked about that in prior. It's really how it's presented in prior chapters. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that. Of course, the evaluation would be the one that brings on defensive behavior, and the description being a better version. The next one was control and problem orientation. I think that's a big one. I think that so many times we're trying to control the situation. We're trying to control the way that the communication goes or control the person. And I think you have to be really careful, because by doing that, it makes them jump to the defense. And that's what he's saying. Instead, problem orientation, it says the speaker secretly views the listener as, no, this is if you do the control. You're viewing them as ignorant. Sorry, I read the wrong thing. But it talks about in problem orientation, you're letting the communication evolve. You don't have a hidden agenda. And that goes right along with the strategy and spontaneity. How many times have you talked to somebody who has a hidden agenda? I mean, they're leading you. They're wanting you to do this certain thing. And it's a part of control, but it's a part of them having their own strategy for the way that the communication is going to go. And what ticks me off more than anything is then when they try to make it seem like, oh, well, that was your idea. Ooh, that gripes me, and that gets me really defensive. And so I really thought the strategy one was a very important thing, because what we need to do is just have spontaneity. We need to let those communications flow. How do we know that somebody doesn't have a better idea than us? And guess what? I think that happens. So I think that's an important one. It says, in contrast, behavior that appears to be spontaneous and free of deception is defense reducive. If the communicator is seen as having a clean ID, as having uncomplicated motivations, as being straightforward and honest, as behaving spontaneously in response to a situation, he or she is likely to arouse minimal defensiveness. Bottom line, that's how we want to communicate. We don't want to have people jump to the defense. We don't want to feel like we're being personally attacked. And I sure don't want to be somebody who personally attacks others. And we have to be really careful in the way we speak and the way that we verbally and non-verbally exchange. Another one was neutrality and empathy. I think that one's a pretty easy one. When neutrality in the speech appears to the listener indicate lack of concern or welfare, it becomes defensive. If you're not even listening to me, why should I even talk to you? So, empathetic, listen, I think that's kind of an easy one. One we miss, but an easy one. Excuse me. The other one is superiority and equality. Have you ever talked to somebody who just thinks they're better than you, and they make sure every turn, every twist, every turn, you know it? Oh, that makes me mad. And it sure doesn't make me want to talk to the person. And so I think that's a big one. I think that we're not better than anybody. And in my religion, we're all God's children. And we sometimes put ourselves on such a pedestal that we can't look down from our perch long enough to realize that, you know what, we're imperfect and so are they. So equality is a big one that we all need to work on. The one that I found the most fascinating was the certainty and provisionalism. It says, need to be the right person. Now that's me sometimes. Sometimes I just have to be right. It just drives me crazy. And my father and my sister are the worst. One reduces the defensiveness of the listener when one communicates that one is willing to experiment with one's own behaviors, attitudes, and ideas. So that means you have an open mind. It means that you don't think your way is the only way. And when you talk to somebody like that, why even give your opinion? They're not going to listen. They're not even going to like it. In fact, probably what they'll do is they'll reject it, and then you're even more defensive. So I think that's a big one. It says the person who appears to be taking provisional attitudes to be investigating issues rather than taking sides on them, to be problem solving rather than doubting, and to be willing to experiment and explore tends to communicate that the listener may have some control over the shared quest or the investigation of the ideas. What I liked about this was I used it on my children. And let me tell you my experience. The thing about kids is when you're the parent, you want to teach them everything, you want to give them everything, you want to help them learn, and it's just such a role, you just feel so much responsibility. But here's the thing. We can't give them everything. And do you know what? Most of the time, I can learn more from them than they can learn from me. But I've never really looked at it like that. So instead of always going them to solve their problems, because that's what I do, I'm a problem solver, I've let them try and solve some problems. And do you know what? They learned more. It went better. It was just so exhilarating to see, you know. And I have kids of all ages. I have 12, 10, 6, and 2. And my 6-year-old, oh, I just want to kill her some days. And you know what, I'll tell you what? By giving her the freedom to problem solve her own instead of me always fixing it, has made her a different little girl. I just think that we need that responsibility to know that somebody listens to us and to know that somebody trusts us enough to let us problem solve. And I think by doing so, I'm less defensive, she's less defensive, you know, she doesn't automatically think I'm just trying to swoop in, fix it, and get on to the next catastrophe. So I'm so excited that I got to talk about defensiveness and to study it more, because it's just changed me. It's changed me. It's changed my family. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I really think that if we could just limit the way that we talk to others in bringing out defensiveness, and if we can really work on ourselves and our own self-awareness, I think we'd have a different genre of communication. I honestly do. Thank you.